To understand that, you have to start with my parents, and actually with my grandparents, because my father, Leonard Rosenberg, was raised in an Orthodox Jewish home. His family were Orthodox Jews, and his grandparents escaped out of Russia under the time of the Tsars in the early 1900s, 1906, 1907, 1908, right around there. And at the time, if you were an Orthodox Jew living in anti-Semitic, fascist, Tsarist Russia, you had two options. You could fiddle on the roof, or you could try to get out. Now, unfortunately, obviously most Jews were not able to get out, but many were able to get out. And my grandparents, actually they were children, but their parents hid them in a hay wagon with them and very few personal possessions, a hay wagon that was crossing out of Russia and into Central Europe. And when they got to the border, Tsarist soldiers took their swords and plunged them into the hay to see if anyone was in there. And by the grace of God, no one was injured. Nobody sneezed. None of the children, of which there were quite a few in that hay wagon, said, "Are we there yet? I gotta go to the bathroom." By God's grace, and that's the only way to say it, they got out. And having gotten out of anti-Semitic, fascist, Tsarist Russia, they didn't say, "Great, let's settle in Germany or Austria or Poland," as many Jews did, getting out of one frying pan but ending up in the fires, literally. But for some reason, by the grace of God, and none of my family knew the Lord personally, none of them believed that Jesus was Messiah, but God moved them across the continent of Europe and got them on a ship and got them to New York City. And like any good Jewish family, they set up shop in Brooklyn. And that's where they settled, and that's where my father and his brother were born. Now, my father grew up in an Orthodox Jewish family, and his grandparents, his grandfather was a black hat Orthodox Jew. I mean, black coat, black hat. I mean, he was the real deal. They celebrated Passover. They celebrated Hanukkah. They celebrated Purim, which we are celebrating tonight in the Jewish world. The salvation, the rescue of Jews from a Persian, Iranian tyrant who wanted to annihilate all the Jews, as we read in the book of Esther. They celebrated the holidays. They went to synagogue on Saturdays. They kept kosher, which meant they had 4 sets of dishes. 2 sets, milk, meat, for regular, and then another set for holidays. My father had a very difficult relationship, however, with his parents. There was a lot of tension there, and my father will tell you, and he's alive today, and he will tell you that it was as much his fault, perhaps, that as his parents. I mean, they both bore a lot of guilt for how they treated each other. But the point is, my father was growing up in an environment with not a lot of love, and this shaped how he thought about life. So by the time he went to Hebrew school, he was bar mitzvahed at the age of 13. He used to wear a yarmulke, though he was embarrassed by wearing a yarmulke on the streets of Brooklyn, even though there were other Jews, but there were a lot of other people from other religions too. So as soon as he got out of the house, his mother made him wear it, but he would immediately put a baseball cap on, Brooklyn Dodgers, as he left the house. And so it was a rough neighborhood and a rough growing up, and nobody there knew the Lord. And so my father says that his first language was cursing, and his second language was Yiddish, and his third language is English. And so that's the world that my father grew up in. Now, at the age of 18, he finally said, I've had it. I've had it with my parents. I've had it with the synagogue. I've had it with Brooklyn. I'm getting out of here. I'm leaving. I'm never coming back. I'm going to the promised land. La Jolla, California. He certainly wasn't going to Israel because his relationship with Judaism was messed up. Now, there's a lot of wonderful Orthodox Jewish families in the world who are loving and who are warm, and they may not they don't agree with me on who the Messiah is, but that was not the family that my father grew up in. So you just need to know that, because it's a critical part of the story. So he gets out to California. He wants to be an architect. He gets trained to be an architect. He gets his first job at an architectural firm in Syracuse, New York, in central New York, which was like, a little chillier. So he moves there, you get a job, you need a job, and he meets the woman he's going to marry, the woman who's eventually going to become my mother. Now, my mom was raised in central New York, in a little town called Rome, New York, and she had a very sad life also growing up. Her father was a violent alcoholic, abusive, tried to kill her mother with an axe at one point, and that's what led to the divorce. And by God's grace, God protected my grandmother and my mom, but she was an only child, being raised by a single mom in the 40s, in the 50s, and it was hard. They did go to a little Protestant church, but my mom never remembers ever hearing John 3:16. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, Jesus, and that whosoever should believe in him shall not perish, die, and go to hell forever and ever and ever with no way of escape, but shall have everlasting life. Doesn't ever remember hearing that verse in a church. It was really a dead church, unfortunately. She doesn't remember hearing John 14:6 when Jesus said, I am the way and the truth and the life, and no one comes to the Father except through me. She doesn't remember hearing John 1:12, but as many as received him, Jesus the Savior, to them he gave the right to become children of God, even to those who believe in his name. She didn't know God loved her enough to send Jesus to die on a cross and rise again. She didn't know that Jesus was the only way to heaven, but fortunately was a way. There is a way to get to heaven. And she didn't know that she could individually, personally receive Jesus as her Savior and be forgiven of her sins and find a peace that passes all understanding, according to the Scriptures, and a hope as an anchor for her soul, and wisdom from above, from God's wisdom, not earthly wisdom. She had no idea. She just grew up in an environment which she thought she was a Christian, but it had no impact on her life. So she grows up, she becomes, she goes to college, she goes to graduate school, she becomes a teacher in Syracuse. And she's also taking some graduate classes, and she just happens to move into the same apartment complex as Len Rosenberg. So they meet, and they fall in love. Now, they're both lost people, but they found love in each other, and so my father happened to be traveling to Europe. He went to Holland, he bought a diamond, he got it put into a ring, comes back, shows his mother, hey, this is the diamond ring I'm going to give to Mary Joan Copia. And she freaks out. Right? She's an Orthodox Jewish woman whose family and she have escaped out of Russia, and now my father is going to propose to a Gentile Protestant woman. She not only freaks out, but she offers to buy the engagement ring back from him at a profit to him that he not marry the shiksa, the non-Jewish girl, okay? Now, you have to understand that Jewish people don't like to pay retail. They certainly don't want to pay a markup to their own son. But I think that little moment illustrates how dead set against this marriage she was. Given how bad my father's relationship to his parents was, I don't understand why he didn't just take the money and run. But anyway, he said, no, I'm going to marry her, and he did. That was 1965.